I think about it like if God laid it on your heart and he says you're called to be a doctor, well, that's not just going to manifest because you wish it, want it, pray for it. You do all of these things to carry out what God said, but so many times along the way we get distracted and it feels like this is too hard. I'm going to pivot. Hi, I'm Megann Marcellino. Welcome back to Generations at the Table. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for taking the time to sow into your spiritual life and your development. I hope that you walk away today encouraged and with 3 steps for operating in seasons of transitions and 3 steps for moving through seasons of transition successfully. Something that we've really been going through the last few years personally is a lot of different transitions. And sometimes they're painful and sometimes they're exciting. But what I have noticed about all of them is they are overwhelming. And so how can we go through seasons of transitions with grace and favor? And how can we operate in them from a place of, with a mindset of hope and provision for God's future that he has for us, and seeing that instead of like from a place of fear and worry. Just this morning, I was having a conversation with my husband, Paul, and I said to him, this time last year we were going through a transition and it was not easy and it was not fun and there was a lot of negativity associated with it. And I was like, and it was hard. But I was like, I'm actually a little more overwhelmed this year with all of the good transition that's happening and navigating it and just some of the things that God's doing in our life personally. Like, it just feels like there's a lot of moving pieces. And in a sense, that was a negative transition and this is positive, but I'm still overwhelmed. And I was like, so how is it that you can be overwhelmed with good and you can be overwhelmed with bad? And I think it's when we try to carry things that we were never meant to carry, right? The Lord instructs us to take on his yoke. He says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. But when we go through seasons of transition, I think one of the biggest snares of the enemy is to try and carry the future and carry the results. And our job as disciples is to walk in obedience day by day in those small baby steps. So how do you know if you're in a season of transition? Like, you're like, am I feeling this? Is this what I think it is? Is this just a moment? For me, I find that it's often a season where I'm uneasy, I'm unsettled. I feel like a need for growth and change and something to move and something to be different. Sometimes I can't pinpoint when it is. Sometimes I know. I've heard someone liken it to being a plant where it's root bound in a pot and you need to be transplanted into a bigger pot. And the roots are busting the pot, you're bursting at the seams because you are in a season of transition and it is time for you to be transplanted into your next bigger pot so that you can grow. And if you're on a true, healthy spiritual journey, you're constantly going to be going from a little pot to a bigger pot to a bigger pot, right? That is the goal of our life, is to be ever growing and to be transplanted. I notice for me that transition sometimes it includes growth, but often it includes a pruning back or a moving away from. And it can feel scary. Even if it's a positive experience, it's like, well, why are you removing this from my life? And I realize that it's because he's trying to give me something else to hold in my hands. And transition is often very much marked by a lot of change in a lot of areas. You may start seeing it in your family life, your business, your ministry, your church, your relationships. It's just like this flood of change. And what is it about this that is unsettling? And it can create fear. But when we look at the future and say, Lord, I'm trusting you with what you're doing in my life. How can I navigate this season of transition and recognize the seasonality of it in grace and with favor? Because transition doesn't last forever, but it does move us from one place to the next. I'm going to say that again. Transition does not last forever, but it does move you from one place to the next. You look at this in really big moments in our life. Like if you've ever given birth to a child, that transition moment is when you are truly transitioning and preparing to bring them, outside of the womb and into the world. And it is hard. It is scary. You feel like you can't do it. You feel like you're going to give up. You feel like your body's going to give up. It is the most intense part of labor, and it is called the transition. And then we all know and have heard or been or witnessed and seen that transition from life into death. I mean, I serve, in a ministry. And so with pastors and leaders, and I've received text messages like, yes, they are preparing to transition to their heavenly home. We are with them in this moment of transition. There's literally a transition that's happening as bodies are shutting down and spirits are being received into heaven. And so those are really big life moments. That's a birth and a death experience. But what gets us there? The transition moment. And what is so scary? The transition moment. But the fruit of that moment, both of those moments, is beautiful. The fruit of birth and the fruit of new life in heaven. But we can't get there without making that transition. So how do we do that from a place of grace and favor? How do we navigate it? How do we walk through it? I think it's important to recognize that seasons of transition are opportunities for something new. But opportunities have to be accepted and opportunities have to be walked out. Proverbs 10:5 says, know the importance of the season you are in, and a wise son you will be. But what a waste when an incompetent son sleeps through the day of opportunity. And competence simply reflects our ability to do something, our knowledge and our skill base. So if we do not have the ability, the knowledge, the skill base, if we are not prepared, we will sleep through opportunity. In the last episode, we talked about being prepared. Well, being prepared affords us the ability to walk through that opportunity that the Lord has given us. And sometimes that preparation, you have to go back to that last point of instruction. And, I think about it like if God laid it on your heart and he says, you're called to be a doctor, well, that's not just going to manifest because you wish it, want it, pray for it. If the Lord has called you to be a doctor, then you have to apply yourself in school. You have to get accepted to college, and you have to go to medical school. You have to serve in residency. And then you do all of these things to carry out what God said. But so many times along the way, we get distracted and it feels like this is too hard. I'm going to pivot. Actually, in the next episode, I'm really excited to talk to you about those moments when we choose to pivot and the power of our no and the impact that can have on our life. But that's another conversation. So let's look at Abraham. He provides like a foundational example of transition in both Judaism and in Christianity. Genesis 12:1-4 says this. Now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country. That's a big transition. From your family, more transition. And from your father's house to a land that I will show you. Huge transition. You're going to a place you do not know. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. So you see this, God says, transition, 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 and here's the promise of this transition. But it was linked to all these steps of obedience. And then what does it say? It says, so Abram departed. Abram responded to God's invitation to transition into something new and unknown with obedience. And that is the example we must follow. How do we follow each step of the way? Abram demonstrated faith in God's promise. He demonstrated obedience and action, and he demonstrated the ability to trust God's timing. We all know that Abraham's journey was not immediate. It did not all just fall into place, similar to the Israelites crossing over into the promised land. They were in the desert for 40 years. And I know that it didn't have to be that way, but that's their story. That's their testimony. And so what can we learn from these seasons of transition? I think it is, so Abram departed. So keep moving, keep operating in that season of transition, and don't get stuck in the fear of what was or what can be. When we walk through transitions with grace, I think we operate from a place of acceptance and surrender, and not trying to micromanage exactly what they look like and exactly what the results may be. Usually for me, and this is just my testimony, when God gives me instruction to do something, he doesn't always tell me every step that it's going to take to get there. He doesn't tell me exactly what it's going to look like, but he gives me a dream and a vision and a desire for something. And along the way, I find those steps of instruction. And along the way, I find those breadcrumbs. The other day, we went on a walk as a family, and Arabella picked these little like dandelion flowers. Like, they were yellow. They hadn't busted out into white yet. And she just dropped them along the way. And I didn't even realize she was doing it. Like, I saw her do a few, but she did a whole bunch. And when we turned around through our neighborhood to walk back, I just kept seeing these little flowers, this little path back towards home. And I thought how beautiful it was and how sweet it was that she had done that. But it was like, these are little breadcrumbs. These are little flowers of a trail of here's your way back. And the Lord does that for us in seasons where we're transitioning, but you're not going to see 1 mile, 2 mile ahead. You may only be able to see the next step, but like Abram, we must depart in the midst of the unknowns. And then it's wise to discern seasons of transition and recognize that they don't last forever, but they are but a moment, but you have to embrace them for the opportunity that they are. And that if you say no, that there are consequences. And if you say yes, then there are blessings. But the choice is yours and you do have free will. And sometimes we reject God's opportunity to transition. And sometimes I think he gives us a second chance and it may not look the same. But transitions are opportunities for greatness. And so although they are scary and although sometimes it's concerning and overwhelming, it's an opportunity to step into something new that he has for you. So I would encourage you to make peace with the unrest and say, okay, I'm feeling this inside of me. I'm feeling this change, this birthing process, this dying to what was, this coming into something new. But I'm going to be at peace with this unrest. And I'm just going to say, this unsettling is going to sit there for a while. But this is what keeps me moving into a place of peace that surpasses understanding. But I'm just going to make peace that for this moment, in the season of transition, it's going to be there. And I don't have to fix it. I don't have to band-aid it. I don't have to do something to try and get rid of it. It's okay to feel it in this moment because this is what keeps inspiring me to make the change, to take the leap, to get repotted into a different pot, to go in that direction that God has for me. Proverbs 3:5-6 talks to us about, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him. And what? And he shall direct your paths. So it is trust in the Lord, acknowledging him in everything that we do. And the fruit of that is the direction of our paths, which our whole life is a path forward. I think if you want to read the full scripture, 5-12, if you go on like verse 8, it says, verse 7, it says, be not wise in your own eyes. This is the Amplified Version. Reverently fear and worship the Lord and turn entirely away from evil. It shall be health to your nerves and sinews and marrow and moistening to your bones. Honor the Lord with your capital and sufficiency from righteous labors. Honor God with your finances and with the first fruits of all your income. So shall your storage places be filled with plenty and your vats shall be overflowing with new wine. So when we honor God with our finances, he honors us with provision. My son, do not despise or shrink from the chastening of the Lord, his correction by punishment or the subjugation to suffering or trial. Neither be weary or impatient about or loathe or abhor his reproof. For whom the Lord loves, he corrects, even as a father corrects the son in whom he delights. Sometimes seasons of transition feel like correction. It may even feel like punishment. It may even feel like you did something wrong. But we have to realize that when God is realigning us and positioning us, sometimes it feels uncomfortable and it feels like the correction of the Lord, but we need to trust that the Lord is correcting us to get us on the right path. Just like you correct your kids and say, hey, don't touch that, it's hot. The Lord is saying, hey, don't touch that, it's hot. Focus your attention over here. And that it's not correction because he's angry at you. It's not correction even maybe because you've done something wrong. I mean, maybe it is. The Lord corrects us when we make mistakes, but sometimes we also correct our children to put them on the right path. Now, this is how you should do something. Dreams and ideas are birthed in seasons of transition. Vision, hope, new thoughts for the future, new plans, but it takes time and it must happen in God's timing. So rest in that. You're making peace with the unrest. You're accepting the new dreams and visions, but you're realizing that it has to happen in God's timing. And that is something that we yield and surrender to. We operate in faith and in patience and in waiting on the Lord. And then we navigate both the painful and exciting times of transition according to the Word of God. We apply all these principles that we've been talking about today, whether you are in that painful transition, the death of something that you love, the changing of the guard, or the birth of something that's new and exciting. Regardless of what that is, these principles of transition still apply. And see, I think sometimes we want to apply them to the exciting times, the hopeful times, the transitions that we love, the ones that make us feel like we have life breathed into us. But sometimes transitions are painful, and the same truth of God's word still applies. And in that, we must yield to God's timing. So I said I would give you 3 steps to operating through seasons of transition from a place that you can unlock blessings for your life. So here they are in summary. We've covered them today. Number 1, seek the Lord. Seek the Lord and stay in his word. When you are in a season of transition, keep his word before you and remember that you are the fruit of your counselors. You are the fruit of who is speaking inside of you. So if you are operating a season of transition, try to have someone that you can listen to, even if you don't know them, who can be a mentor to you that says, here's how you do this with grace. Here's how you do this with favor. Remain obedient. It can be really hard to remain obedient. It can be easy to fall into discouragement, depression, oppression, hopelessness in season of transitions. But remaining obedient and knowing that there is going to be light at the end of the tunnel, and then take the next step of faith. Do not become stagnant. If you think about stagnant waters, what is that? It is icky, it is murky, it is algae, it is pond, it is the Dead Sea. You want to be a place of living water, and living water is moving. Rivers are moving. Oceans are moving. Healthy lakes have an intake and an output, right? That is what you want to be in your spiritual and your physical life. You want to bring in the good and you want to pour out the good. You want to bring in and pour out from an overflow, because a truly healthy life not only absorbs, but you have a place to give. So what are your outlets? What's your input? Is it a healthy input or is it a negative input? Do you need to make a change? And then what's your output? How are you sowing into your community, sowing into your family, sowing into someone else? I think one of the best things you can do in a season of transition when you are in a place of unrest or feeling uncomfortable is to put your focus on someone besides yourself and to sow into them in love. And take that focus off of this me, and this entitlement and say, you know what, just for a minute, I'm going to look into the lives of someone else and see how I can sow to them. So seek the Lord, remain obedient, and take the next step of faith. Those are 3 things that you can do. Didn't say they were easy, but they are 3 things that you can do to navigate seasons of transition, to ultimately unlock keys for blessings and favor into your life. Okay, one last thing. I want to give you a scriptural support for this is 2 Corinthians 5:7, for we walk by faith and not by sight. Remember in seasons of transition to lean on your faith and not what you see. Like the spies who went out to spy the land, only 2 came back with a good report. Everybody saw the same thing. They all saw the same thing, but only 2 had the perception of prophetic promise. Only 2 had the perception of we can do this. Only 2 saw the transition as an opportunity. The others, what did they do? They came back with fear and trepidation. How are you seeing this transition? Look at it from a place of hope. Look at it from a place of faithfulness and a place of what God has in store for you. I'd love to hear from you today. Please, in the comments, let us know kind of a season of transition, how you operate from it. How do you keep that healthy mindset? I'd love to know some tips and tricks from you of how you maintain a mindset of hope and faith when you're navigating seasons of transition. And I'll see you next week. Really excited to talk to you about the power of your no and the trickle-down effect.